What's going on? So I'm at work, so I figured I'd just make this quick video right quick while we have a pause in the activities. And so, uh, you don't know, that's what we do. We renovate houses and stuff like that, and whatever needs to be done inside our homes. So we stay busy. There's never not work. So, but let's talk about Michigan. We just had our primary election voting yesterday, and congratulations to John James. He won his primary for governor. I pray he wins the whole shebang. We need a change here in this beautiful state of ours. He's a Republican. And I just want to talk about how someone I know, I'm not going to say who, but they were a Trump supporter. Not really so much a Trump supporter, more because you only really have two parties to select from. I mean, there are other parties, but they're not the main branches of that system, right? Um, so it wasn't so much being a Trump, like the Trump supporter, but more against the Democratic Party and what they were doing under Biden, right? And so during this election, she switched up and started back voting for the Democrats. I could never see myself ever voting for a Democrat ever again, right? And so I asked her, I said, well, why? The Democrat policies are open borders, and here in Michigan they have abortion after birth abortion. Just the whole Democratic policies just go against everything we stand for as Christians. And so it shocked me that she went back to voting for the Democrats. And I asked her, I said, well, why did you do that? Their policies are open borders and late term abortions and transgenderism and homosexuality, everything that goes against our belief as Christians, and so and she just went on to say, oh, it's about affordability and all this. It's just, the regular CNN talking points like, under Trump, because things are more expensive now, that I'm going to vote for the Democrats. And it just, to me, I just don't understand that. It's like you take one thing, like you don't look at all the wins, all the good the Trump administration has done since he's been in office. And you know what? And it's not just limited to her. It's something that we all do as people. I noticed here in this country, because under Biden it was ridiculous. Everybody saw the open borders. You saw how they want to push men and women's sports and transgender children. All these different policies that the Democratic Party were pushing forward under the Biden administration. And then they just put Kamala in position to be president, right? Without a primary, hold a primary, and just that whole 4 years under Biden was a disaster, and and so Trump wins again, thank God for that, and closes the border, slows down a lot of that stuff the Democratic Party were trying to do, right? Okay, so good, that's what I voted for. And it seems like just a couple years later, here we are, people are forgetting what it was like under a Democratic government, right? And thinking that these people are going to just, oh, okay, well, let's vote for the Democrats and then the economy is going to get better. And it's like, no, these people are going to go right back to what they're doing. They're going to open the borders, allow all. And so I'm explaining that to her. I said, so why would you vote for the Democrats? You just want to open the borders. Well, I'm okay with people coming over here now. Really? So you don't mind people just, any and everybody can just walk into this country? Oh, well, no, they should do it. Democrats aren't trying to allow people to do legal immigration. They're trying to just open the borders and allow anybody to come into this country. That's illegal. You know what I'm saying? And so I said, okay, well, what about the abortion thing? Didn't have an answer for that. Well, I'm willing to accept the abortion if the Democrats can lower the cost of living. It's just, it blows my mind, And then she just went on a rampage about Trump, and it's like, well, dang, just a couple years ago, you was all about, Trump and getting these Democrats out of office, but then 2 years later, you don't bought into the narrative that Trump is doing a bad job and it's because of him that things are more expensive. It's just I try to understand this about people. For me, I look at policies. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, okay, things are more expensive. That's how life is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, no president is gonna come into office and then next thing you know, you got dollar gas and 50-cent loaf of bread. That's not going to happen, right? That's a pipe dream. And so things cost what they cost. You just have to make adjustments in your life. But to sit back and say, oh, well, I'm done with the Republican Party because they can't, the cost of living is high, so I'm going to go back to the Democrats. So what? What are they going to lower something 10, 20, 30 cents, but then open the borders, push this abortion agenda, this homosexual agenda, this transgender, like everything that goes against our belief as Christians, and I just want to talk about that because honestly, it blew my mind, and I know she's not alone in that, right? There are many people who voted for Trump who are, saying the same things, and it's like, oh, well, things are more expensive now, so we're going to go back to the Democrats, as if, right, as if the Democrats are going to, like, right, okay, and let's just say they do, right? Let's just say somehow or another you put Democrats back in power, and then gas goes down to $2, like everything goes down to where everybody's like, oh, hey, things are cheaper now. But then you're letting millions of illegals in. They want to take your children and turn them into boys into girls and girls into boys against your permission, right? That's a policy. They're pushing after birth abortion. So you willing to pay 50 cents less for a loaf of bread, but then allow all these other things, right? And I just don't understand that. I don't care how much the cost of living is. Things cost what they cost. That is what it is. You know what I'm saying? You have to adjust around that, right? I'm willing to pay the cost of living if it means keeping our borders secure, right? From allowing these illegals into our country, getting free everything, right? If it means curbing their abortion agenda, and you know what? And a side note on that, because we talked about that for a minute, and so she was like, well, I think people should be able to choose what they want to do. God gives us free will. So you're okay with the Democrats pushing this after birth abortion agenda because people should be allowed to do what they want to do. What logic does that make? Why don't we stop abortion, right, as a form of birth control? How about that? Well, people are going to get abortions. And true indeed, women have been killing babies since babies were started, okay, but not in mass numbers. Women weren't being loose, right, because of fear of getting pregnant. you know what I'm saying? So there was more women were not allowing themselves to be pregnant, right? And then on top of that, you're using abortion as a form of birth control, and that's not right. You know what I'm saying? So that whole thing is just crazy. So that was a side argument on that. I couldn't understand that, right? And it was like, damn, well, that doesn't make any sense. You're okay with the killing of babies because we have a right to choose what we want to do. Make that make sense. Yeah, that's working. We gotta tear out this tile in the bathroom. So let me wrap this up so I can get back going. But yeah. So anyway, so that was the conversation behind yesterday's primary election. I voted for John James, so I'm excited that he won his primary. I pray he wins it all. I think we should give him a shot as governor. of Michigan. You know, I like to see it change. But yeah, I just wanted to get on here and say that. I know we're going into the November midterms, and I know a lot of people out there have lost any type of confidence in the Republican Party. And you know, there's arguments to be made there. You know, they are that still same effortless party. You know what I'm saying? They don't really want to put their foot down on much of anything. But thank God we saw throughout this year that a lot of those rhinos, as they are called, were finally pushed out the way. You know, and so they're really trying to form that Republican Party. So finally they'll start standing on business, as we like to say out here in the streets, right? So I just want to just speak on that. You know, if you know people like that that were once Trump supporters, but now you know they got to pay 50 cents more for stuff, and now they're ready to run back to the Democratic Party as if that's the party. You know, that is the most anti-God, anti-American, socialist, communist party in this country. You know, and I can't see how people think that's an option uh, to governing us in this country. You know, it's not an option at all. You know, to me, the only option we have is a conservative Republican Party. You know, and so I still stand with them as long as they can continue to have conservative values, the American First agenda. The Republican Party has my vote, right? And you know, I'm just one American, you know, sharing my opinion on things. But it's just heartbreaking to see how people will abandon, you know, Trump, the Republicans, the whole conservative movement, because they got to pay 50 cents more, right? And the Democratic Party, you see what's going on. Look up in New York with Mamdani. The Islamic takeover have taken over the Democratic Party, Democratic Socialists of America. So a lot of people aren't really paying attention. You know, they just think because things cost 50 cents more that this other political party has the answer, and they don't. They're going to go right back to what they were doing under Biden: open the borders, men and women's sports, transgendering kids, everything that goes against my belief as a Christian, you know. And so I'll leave it there. I know I haven't made a video in a while. We've been busy. And so I probably have to just start making my videos more like this while I'm on site, you know, and and make my coworker upset. Because anytime you see me not working for 5 minutes, you think I'm shamming, right? But thank you for watching. If you haven't already, hit a like, to subscribe, and leave a comment. I welcome it all. Until next time.